So basically the concept is Wolverine is totally fucked up. It's the near future. Mutants have been pretty much wiped off the face of the earth. Professor Xavier is suffering from dementia and is not all the way there all the time. I mean, it's basically a story about two men waiting to die until a purpose suddenly strays into their path in the form of a young girl with powers strangely similar to Wolverine's. There also seems to be some shady organization after her, and Xavier basically forces Wolverine to take this girl to safety. That's really all you kind of need to know, to be honest. But the main thing I'll say is the movie directly quotes Shane, and when it does, I turned into a 5-year-old boy. It fucking broke me, dude. I couldn't fucking talk for like 5 minutes afterwards. There was some deep emotional feels going on at the end of this movie, man. I was just a broken human being. It was an intense experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I kind of feel like this is basically the movie that James Mangold has been essentially building towards for pretty much his whole career. I mean, have you ever seen Copland?
God, what's that one?
It's one where Sylvester Stallone plays this small town sheriff in New Jersey, and he sort of presides over a town that's almost entirely filled with cops who work in New York City. And the idea is basically they created this town so they could kind of like be sort of free of the sort of crime and scum of New York. But like the city is deeply corrupt because, of course, of all the power in it. And like Sylvester Stallone's basically like this powerless figurehead sheriff who was like this local town hero, but who had like... He was in an accident that basically meant he's kind of got like fucked up hearing and sort of stuff. And so basically he has to sort of take on all these sort of corrupt cops in the town. And it's basically a Western, except it's set in like modern New Jersey. And Sylvester Stallone's really great in it. And it's a movie that unfortunately I don't think did very well, but you know, should have gotten a lot more attention than it did. And then he also made 3:10 to Yuma. Cool, and then of course, you know, he made a movie about Johnny Cash. He made Walk the Line. So he's and I mean, again, like you know, it's like after like literally the last 5 minutes of this movie, which again, like I said, broke me, then it had to finish with a Johnny Cash song at the end. That was just like I was just like, this what's this movie doing to me, man? What is this movie fucking doing?
The trailer uses Hurt, right? The Johnny Cash version.
This one uses closing credits. It uses When the Man Comes Around.
Oh yeah, okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is very much a Western in, you know, in themes and ideas. It's, I mean, it's essentially positing, like we said, like we said on this podcast many times, it's positing Wolverine as the kind of man of the wilderness, man of violence who is necessary for the forging of civilization, but cannot be part of civilization. And it's, you know, and I mean, essentially, again, like the film's very explicit in this. It basically makes him Shane. And it's interesting how I think the movie does something with the fact that it has this character who there's so much kind of audience identification with and so much awareness of him over what I think is like 8 movies, and really uses it to really play with it and do something interesting with it. But I think ultimately the thing that I really liked about the movie the most is the fact that this was its own thing. It wasn't just like another installment in, you know, it's like what we talk about with, you know, brand management, how the studios have become brand managers. You know, this wasn't a piece of brand management. This didn't feel like it's there to set up future franchises and future Fox properties. This just felt like its own standalone story. And I mean, it was using memorable characters. But I mean, you could say in the same way as, say, a movie like, I don't know, The Color of Money or The Two Jakes or something like that, where it takes something from another iconic film and, you know, sort of recontextualizes them and puts them in a different kind of setting and deals with age. I mean, I'd say the film that it actually made me think of quite a bit was Creed. Did you see Creed?
I did. I liked Creed.
In terms of what Creed was doing. I mean, obviously they're completely different films, but in terms of what it's doing with taking an iconic character and recontextualizing him, it does a lot with that, and the way it kind of makes Xavier into this old man suffering from dementia. Of course, the problem is that Xavier because he's so powerful mentally. The fact that he's suffering from dementia makes him incredibly dangerous. And it's interesting how it deals with the ideas of, you know, death and age and, you know, responsibility and, you know, and it's fucking great. And the ensemble cast is great too. Boyd Holbrook, who's somebody who I've seen on Narcos, and I've always thought he was fine on Narcos, but I thought he was great in this. He was like really charismatic, really good in the sort of as the villain character. And the little girl, man, we are talking like Natalie Portman in Leon, aka The Professional, levels of, you know, sort of star making. Like this little girl was just fantastic, like way above and beyond. So your whole little rant about child actors, man, you can fuck right off, because this girl was fucking spectacular.
No, it's not that they're not talented. It's that their lives will get fucked up. Do your thing, girl. Do your thing.
Things seem to be going all right for Natalie Portman, don't they?
I don't know, man. Like, is she happy with her child? Like, now she's got a second one on the way. Maybe she didn't want to be knocked up. I don't know, dude. You don't know what's going on in her head.
What is
Try
that?
to throw that shit. Don't psychobabble her shit.
That could be any woman, though. Why is that specifically to a child actress?
Because it justifies my point, Kier. It's called circular reasoning, okay?
Anyway, basically, I don't know how concisely I can say it, but I fucking loved Logan, and I think, you know, I could very easily see it being in my top 10 at the end of the year.
Wow.
At the moment, it's my favorite film that's been released this year. I mean, it's not a harsh competition, but it is definitely my favorite film released so far this year. And this was a film that I was fairly cynical about in the build up to it, but you know, it won. I will say it was this basically. I sat down in the theater. I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting. Oh yeah, this is pretty good. This is actually very good. Holy shit! What the fuck just happened?
Now let me ask you this. So, because I've heard this from a lot of different voices now. Yeah. Do you think that a film like this could actually receive any sort of genuine accolades?
I think that there was a lot of goodwill towards Patrick Stewart, and I could see him getting a Best Supporting Actor nomination for it, because he's never been nominated for an Oscar, and you know, everyone loves Patrick Stewart. So yeah. I could kind of see him getting an Oscar nomination for it. That would be the only thing that I would really say is a sort of, you know, a sort of distinct possibility. But I suppose kind of the funny thing is that we had that basically the Oscars got expanded to potentially 10 winners, or 10 Best Picture nominees. And part of the reason for that was because The Dark Knight got snubbed, and everyone kind of said, well, The Dark Knight deserved to be nominated for Best Picture. It just wasn't in a type of film that, you know, that Oscar voters respect. And I would genuinely say that, I mean, I don't in a million years think something like any of the Marvel properties deserve to be nominated for any sort of Best Picture categories or anything like that. But I will say Logan to me is the first superhero / comic book movie that I think actually deserves to be in the same breath as The Dark Knight. You know, I think it's the best superhero film since The Dark Knight.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, and it's I mean, but also, I mean, as we will find out when we get into the Bond things, it does slightly play to my preferences in terms of big spectacle filmmaking, which is I like things to be a bit dark and grittier. But at the same time, it's funny too, because DC is supposed to be the people making the dark and grittier shit, but they don't get the dark and gritty isn't just an aesthetic. You actually have to make a fucking good film. And that's what I think will be the really interesting thing.
Yeah, you can't just shoot in grayscale.
Yeah, well, Logan obviously got made an R rating because of the success of Deadpool. and it's done really well globally in its opening weekend. It took in over 230 million. So I mean, this movie is going to be a big success.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Hugh Jackman actually took a pay cut so that the film could retain its R rating and so that it would have a lower budget. Obviously, 120 million is still a lot, but they wanted to keep the budget down as low as possible because they knew it would be. He wanted it to be an R-rated film, which meant that they were kind of worried about their return on their investment.
When it feels like I said, this feels like the movie that James Mangold and Hugh Jackman always wanted to make out of Wolverine. I feel like, and I mean, it's interesting too because with the Wolverine, they were kind of toying around with this kind of like Wolverine as a samurai archetype type thing, and and of course, samurai mythology is very similar to the mythology of the Western hero, and if you look at the history of samurai films to Western films, there's a lot of crossover. Of course, Kurosawa was very influenced by John Ford, and then equally you have the Magnificent Seven being made out of the Seven Samurai. So there's a long history of kind of these two things being sort of resplendent with each other. But I think the thing that's really interesting is it feels very much like there was a sort of toothless element to when they made the Wolverine, and this time they kind of got the right to make the film that they wanted. And I think also the finality of it, the fact that this was going to be Hugh Jackman's last film as Wolverine, I think that gave them a big freeing aspect as well, where they didn't feel like they were quite as burdened by being driven and sort of part of this larger franchise concept.
Right. Yeah, that's cool, man. I'm excited to see it. It's one of the ones I am not a big fan of superhero films. I loved The Dark Knight, but I'm kind of tired. But it's the saturation.
I would honestly say that you don't even have to know anything. I would say that, beyond maybe knowing the basics of what Wolverine's powers are, you don't have to be a fan of the X-Men. You don't have to give a shit about the X-Men universe. It's not like you're not going to get like 10,000 different characters thrown at you or anything. This is a film about Wolverine. So basically, I don't know, man. It's like, I don't know how many ways I can say go see Logan because it's fucking awesome. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying cool. That's my rating system is go fucking see it.